What if I told you that some of the greatest opportunities in your life may have been hidden behind a feeling you know very well? A feeling that appears right before change, right before growth, right before possibility. Fear. Not fear of monsters, not fear of danger, not fear of the dark, but fear of something much simpler. Something millions of people experience every day. Trying something new. Think about it. A person dreams of starting a business, but never begins. Someone wants to learn a new language, but keeps postponing the first lesson. A student wants to join a club. An employee wants to apply for a better position. An artist wants to share their work. A traveler wants to visit a place they've never seen before. A person wants to talk to someone they admire. Yet somehow, they hesitate. They wait. They overthink. They tell themselves, maybe later. I'm not ready. What if I fail? What if people judge me? What if it goes badly? And sometimes, they never try at all.
But why? Why does the human mind often resist the very experiences that could improve our lives? Why do we stay inside familiar routines, even when we know they are limiting us? And why do so many people discover years later that their biggest regrets are often not their failures, but the chances they never took? Tonight, we are exploring one of the most fascinating mysteries of human psychology, a story involving evolution, survival, the brain, comfort, uncertainty, and the hidden reasons why humans are often afraid of trying new things. This is the story of why we fear the unknown. To understand this fear, we need to travel back thousands of years, long before cities, long before schools, long before technology. Imagine living in a world where every decision could affect your survival. A strange plant might be poisonous. An unfamiliar path might lead to danger. An unknown animal might be deadly. A new environment could contain countless threats. In that world, caution was valuable.
Very valuable. The humans who immediately rushed into every unknown situation often didn't survive long enough to pass on their genes. Meanwhile, those who paused, observed, and treated unfamiliar things carefully had a better chance of surviving. Over many generations, the human brain evolved to pay special attention to uncertainty, and that ancient survival system still exists today. The problem is, the modern world is very different. Starting a new hobby is not life-threatening. Applying for a new job is not the same as facing a predator. Learning a new skill will not poison you. Yet the brain often reacts as though uncertainty itself is dangerous. Because from the brain's perspective, new things mean unknown outcomes, and unknown outcomes require caution. This brings us to one of the brain's favorite places, the comfort zone. The comfort zone is not necessarily a place where life is exciting, or meaningful, or fulfilling. It is simply familiar, and familiarity feels safe. Imagine walking through your own home in the dark. You know where everything is. You know the layout. You know what to expect. Now imagine walking through a completely unfamiliar building. Even if both places are equally safe, the unfamiliar building feels more uncomfortable. Why? Because your brain prefers predictability. Predictability reduces uncertainty, and reducing uncertainty conserves mental energy. In many ways, the comfort zone is an energy-saving mechanism. The brain already knows how everything works there. No surprises, no unexpected challenges, no difficult adjustments. Everything feels manageable. But there is a catch. Growth rarely happens inside the comfort zone, because growth requires adaptation, and adaptation requires novelty, the very thing a brain naturally resists. Now, let's talk about failure.
Because fear of failure is one of the biggest reasons people avoid trying new things. Imagine a child learning to walk. They fall constantly, again and again. Yet they continue. They don't interpret falling as proof that they're incapable. They interpret it as part of learning. Adults often do something different. When adults fail, they frequently attach meaning to the failure. Instead of thinking, I failed at this task, they think, I am a failure. Notice the difference. One statement describes an event. The other describes an identity. And identity-based thinking can become incredibly powerful. Because once failure becomes connected to self-worth, trying new things becomes much scarier. The risk is no longer simply failing. The risk becomes feeling inadequate, feeling embarrassed, feeling judged, feeling incapable. And so, many people avoid trying altogether. Not because they lack ability, but because they want to avoid emotional pain. Interestingly, psychologists have discovered that humans often fear embarrassment more than failure itself. Think about it. Many opportunities involve uncertainty. Giving a presentation, meeting new people, learning a skill, starting a project, sharing creative work. In all these situations, mistakes are normal, but people often imagine something worse than the mistake. They imagine being seen making the mistake. They imagine other people watching, judging, criticizing, laughing, rejecting. This fear is deeply connected to our social nature. For most of human history, belonging to a group was essential. Humans survived through cooperation. Acceptance brought safety. Rejection brought risk. As a result, our brains became highly sensitive to social evaluation. Even today, a small embarrassment can feel surprisingly intense, not because the consequences are severe, but because ancient social instincts are still active. Now let's consider another reason people fear new experiences: the illusion of certainty. Human beings love certainty. We want guarantees. We want predictable outcomes. We want reassurance. We want to know exactly what will happen. The problem is, life rarely provides those guarantees. Every meaningful opportunity contains uncertainty. A new relationship, a new career, a new city, a new business, a new skill, a new dream. None come with certainty. And because of that, many people wait. They wait until they feel ready. They wait until they feel confident. They wait until fear disappears. But something fascinating happens. Fear rarely disappears before action. More often, confidence appears after action, not before it. Think about learning to ride a bicycle. Nobody becomes confident before trying. Confidence emerges from experience, from repetition, from small successes, from surviving mistakes. In other words, confidence is often the result of action, not the prerequisite. Yet many people spend years waiting for a feeling that can only be created through experience. There is another powerful factor involved: the brain's tendency to overestimate risks. Imagine two scenarios. In the first scenario, you try something new and fail. In the second scenario, you never try at all. Which outcome feels worse? For many people, the first scenario feels more frightening because the embarrassment feels immediate. The failure feels visible. The disappointment feels real. But years later, people often discover something surprising. The regret of never trying can become much larger than the pain of failure. Because failure provides information. Failure teaches. Failure creates growth. Failure eventually becomes part of a story. But missed opportunities often remain unanswered questions. Questions like, what if I had tried? What might have happened? Who could I have become? These questions can stay with people for decades, and the human mind often finds uncertainty harder to resolve than failure. Now let's talk about something even deeper: identity. Many people fear new experiences because they threaten existing identities. Imagine someone who sees themselves as intelligent. If they try a completely new skill, they will probably be a beginner. And beginners make mistakes. Suddenly, their identity feels challenged. The same thing happens with people who see themselves as successful, competent, talented, experienced.
Trying something new often means becoming inexperienced again. And surprisingly, many people find that uncomfortable. Because beginners lack certainty. Beginners lack mastery. Beginners lack control. Yet every expert was once a beginner. Every successful entrepreneur, every athlete, every musician, every scientist, every writer, every skilled professional. At some point, they knew almost nothing, and they moved forward anyway. Perhaps one of the greatest misunderstandings about courage is the belief that courageous people are fearless. In reality, most courageous people experience fear just like everyone else. The difference is not the absence of fear. The difference is their relationship with it. They understand something important. Fear is often information, not instruction. Fear can tell you that something matters, that something is uncertain, that something is meaningful. But fear does not automatically mean stop. Sometimes, fear appears precisely because growth is possible, because the outcome matters, because the experience has the power to change you. There's a reason many of life's most memorable moments begin with nervousness. The first day at a new school, the first job interview, the first speech, the first trip abroad, the first performance, the first conversation with someone important, the first step toward a dream. Fear frequently accompanies transformation, because transformation requires entering unfamiliar territory. And unfamiliar territory always activates the brain's caution systems. But perhaps the most fascinating thing about trying new things is what happens afterward. Often, the experience is far less frightening than anticipated. The brain imagines worst-case scenarios, catastrophes, embarrassments, disasters. Yet reality is usually much less dramatic. People adapt, they learn, they improve, they survive. And once the experience becomes familiar, the fear begins to fade. The unknown becomes known. The scary becomes manageable. The impossible becomes ordinary. This process repeats throughout life. Every comfort zone was once unfamiliar. Every skill was once difficult. Every success was once uncertain. Which means that many of the things you currently do with ease were once things that frightened you. Think about that for a moment. There was probably a time when you feared speaking in front of others, or driving, or starting school, or using technology, or meeting new people. Yet now, many of those things feel normal. Not because they changed, but because you changed. Because experience transformed uncertainty into familiarity. And perhaps that is one of the most important lessons hidden inside all of this. The goal is not to eliminate fear. The goal is to understand it. To recognize that fear is often a natural response to growth, a natural response to possibility, a natural response to stepping beyond what is familiar. Because in the end, the human brain evolved to protect you, not necessarily to fulfill you.
not necessarily to help you achieve your dreams, not necessarily to help you reach your potential. Its primary goal is survival, safety, predictability. And sometimes, the safest choice is not the most meaningful one.
Sometimes the most meaningful experiences exist on the other side of uncertainty, on the other side of discomfort, on the other side of fear. So the next time you find yourself hesitating, wondering whether to try something new, remember this: fear does not always mean danger. Sometimes, fear simply means you are standing at the edge of growth, at the edge of possibility, at the edge of a version of yourself that has not yet been discovered. And perhaps the greatest opportunities in life are not found by waiting until fear disappears. Perhaps they are found by taking one small step forward, even while fear is still there. Because every adventure begins with uncertainty. Every achievement begins with inexperience. Every transformation begins with discomfort. And every extraordinary story begins the same way, with someone choosing to move forward into the unknown.